Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. New day, new microphone holder, and today's episode has been brought to us by the Ticonderoga #2 pencil, a certified classic from my childhood and maybe yours. Let's get started with today's video. The question for today is, what do you think about when you're working out? Whether you've been working at home for a while or just trying to get back into working out, or you're just someone who casually workouts but trying to get more motivated to work out, or you're a professional athlete trying to squeeze that last bit of performance. Finding the right place to center your mind when you're working out can be transformative for adherence, for performance, and especially for injury prevention. Which brings us to the topic of today's video, which is, what does exercise science have to say about leveraging different focal points while exercising? So there are two broad dimensions of focus that are mentioned in the scientific literature when working out. There is the associative dimension and there is a dissociative dimension. The associative focal point is typically one where people are very present with their exercise. So for instance, if I'm doing a bicep curl, an associative focal point might be when I'm doing the curl, I'm either thinking about the bicep, I'm thinking about the motion of the curl, or I'm thinking about the weight being moved. It's exercising a level of intention with the exercise that you're doing. The second type of focal point, and there's two that I'm going to talk about, is the dissociative focal point, which is to say the complete opposite. A lack of presence with your exercise, using various stimuli in your environment to distract yourself. So if you're on a jog in the city, for instance, and there's different stimuli, that can be dissociative, or audio-visual stimulus, so listening to music, watching TV, also dissociative stimuli that are worth bearing in mind. So, but what are they both good for? Because they're both actually quite useful, it appears, but they both have very different benefits. So dissociative exercises are really good at two things. The first is having to do with improving adherence and consistency with workouts, bringing a level of joy to the workout experience so that way it can be more consistent. And the second is providing a lot of beginner and intermediate gains, especially for endurance athletes. Let's talk about the first one first. Typically, people trying to get back into fitness as an adult have done so after a long break where either they have reduced their cardiovascular fitness, or they've gained weight, or a mix of both, or other things. But typically, it's really hard to get back into exercising after a long break. It definitely feels like there's a level of friction while working out. Everything just feels very intense. And it's very important for them to have positive experiences, or what we say in the scientific literature, a positive effective response when exercising. Their effective response during the workout and their post-exercise feeling contributes a lot to people continuing to work out. And this is so important for the initial stages. This is also really important for people who work out pretty consistently but are just losing some motivation. And I will say, I tried Orange Theory recently and I loved it. It felt like a party. To be honest, I didn't learn much because it's really hard to hear anything with so much going on. But my heart points went crazy. And finally, it gave me a very long-lasting happiness that translated into an uplifting few workouts after Orange Theory when I returned back to my normal routine. According to a multi-study analysis done by Eric Lint, dissociation is also consistently linked to improvements in feelings of revitalization, positive engagement, tranquility, and reductions in physical exhaustion when going through sub-maximal aerobic exercise. So this totally backs up a lot of what makes Barry's Soul Cycle and these fitness classes work. And in addition, we can also see that in a study conducted by Dave Elliott, they found that when making 18 untrained student volunteers go on a 20-minute sub-maximal cycling task, they found that the volunteers who listened to music were able to travel farther during a short period of time, feel better during the workout, and feel better after the workout compared to folks who did not listen to music at all. In addition, in a research paper titled Hypnotic Susceptibility, Cognitive Dissociation, and Runner's High, a strong correlation between dissociation and runner's high among marathon competitors was found. So I will say there are a few things, like having the perfect playlist when you work out. Like for me, it tends to be quite varied, so I listen to Bhangra and UK drill right now, so that could change. I even have listened to emotional tracks when I work out, like My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion, because that shit bangs. But regardless, when you exercise at higher intensities, over time, your mind, as it gets a better understanding of your body and becomes a lot more aware of the systems at play while you're exercising, your mind will shift to more associative processes. Associative strategies are really good for 3 different use cases. The first is deloading. So typically, if you are engaging in dissociative strategies very often, association and rather just not having as much dissociation can be very useful for the dissociative exercises to still be effective. It's kind of like if you listen to music all the time and blast music all the time, and that's your go-to thing that makes you feel good when you exercise, it may be good leading off every once in a while, kind of like caffeine, lead off every once in a while, so you can retain that motivation and music can still have that effect on you and keep you motivated. The second great use case for associative exercises is for experienced athletes. According to a multi-study analysis by Eric Lind, a plethora of studies point to that across different sports, elite athletes distinctively rely on more associative strategies. So, for example, a study by Dorshit and Weish found that non-elite runners at the Olympic trial marathon used dissociative strategies compared to their elite counterparts who focused much more on the associative strategies. In addition, what was also found was that association enhances performance times for swimming, cross-country, skiing, running, rowing, race walking, triathlon, and many more. In addition, it prevents a lot of marathon runners from hitting the wall, which is a very common condition that runners go through, where they just suddenly run out of energy and either have to take a very long rest so that they can continue, or have to run at a very, very low speed to recover the energy. And again, associative exercises have proven to allow a lot of runners to break past this. And the last really great use case for associative exercises is for very intense exercise bouts. The key here is that exercise intensity is the moderator for effective associative or dissociative strategies. And part of why very intense exercises are good to do in an associative manner is because it can prevent injury and it also allows one to perfect their form. But to be honest, the associative focus can actually be subdivided further into internal associative and external associative. The internally associative focal point is where the focus is on the body performing the exercise. So this means that when you're doing a bicep curl, you focus on the bicep. And when you're doing a sit-up, you focus on the abdomen. Naturally, we gravitate towards this specific focal point when we lift weights. External associative, by comparison, is more of a focus on the movement pattern or the thing being moved. For example, during a bicep curl, we would focus on the actual dumbbell that is being lifted. Or when doing a sit-up, we might focus on the motion of the sit-up. Naturally, we gravitate towards this while doing sports like swinging a bat or throwing a basketball, etc. That's kind of a natural place where our mind goes. But let's talk about what they're good for. Internally associative focal points tend to be really good for having a more intentional use of your body. And it usually results in more muscle fibers being recruited as well as a greater focus on form. Whereas externally associative focal points, where you're focusing on the motion or the thing being moved, tend to be very good for more efficient and lower effort recruitment of muscle fibers, leading to lower recruitment of muscle fibers, but also a lower heart rate. And this oftentimes is because of a greater reliance on your body's autonomic systems. Your body in an externally associative focal point typically works less hard to achieve the same result. And this is largely due to the constrained action hypothesis, which states that focusing attention on action outcomes rather than body movement improves motor performance. So in a study performed by David L. Newman in 2013, they took 24 first-year psychology students and they were made to do 8 rounds of 12 sit-ups each, using one of 4 different strategies. The first strategy was internal associative, where they had to focus on the abs during the sit-ups. The second was external associative, where they were focused on the motion of the sit-ups. And the other 2 were dissociative conditions. The 2 interesting findings were that the group that focused on their abdomen while doing sit-ups, or the internal associative group, had higher overall EMG activity and a higher heart rate by 4 beats per minute, whereas the external associative group conversely had a lower EMG activity or recruited fewer muscle fibers and did 110 beats per minute. And what this showed was there was a more effective recruitment of muscle units, and this can be shown through lower EMG activity and also more efficient recruitment, which is exemplified by the lower heart rate in the external associative groups. The focus on performing the motion caused more of a reliance on the autonomic nervous system, leading to better range of motion and efficiency, whereas conscious control disrupted this efficient process. To recap, dissociative focal points. The focus is away from the body. You are distracting yourself from the exercise at hand. And this is very good for promoting the enjoyment of the exercise. This is really good for making those beginner intermediate gains as you start to gain that really advanced body awareness, and this is really good for endurance athletes. And the second is the associative focal point. The associative focal point is one where you are a lot more present with your body when you're working out, you're more present with the exercise. And this is usually really good for experienced athletes. It's good for deloading your senses. So dissociative exercises can continue to motivate you. It's good for injury prevention. And it's also really, really good for intense exercise bouts when you need to have all your senses about you. The associative focal point can be subdivided into internally associative or externally associative, which in both cases you're still present with the exercise, but the internally associative condition is one where you are present within your body. You focus on specific body parts when you're working out. This is really a lot more typical for things like yoga, for example, or even working out, for example, focusing on form. And externally, which is a focus on the motion that is being performed or on the thing that is being moved. And so benefits of the internally associative focal point include a greater focus on form, making it ideal to learn new motions and for weightlifting, for yoga. And it is often less efficient for muscle recruitment. You'll often recruit more muscle fibers to do the same exercise this way, but that can be a really good thing depending on your use case. The externally associative focal point typically has much more efficient muscle recruitment, that is to say, less muscle fibers being recruited for low to medium intensity exercises, and a greater reliance on the autonomic nervous system. And this tends to be a more economical and less strenuous use on the body. And I think this could be a really good option for medium to heavy training where the focus is on performance rather than trying to perfect the form. And finally, research is completely not conclusive on this and is still ongoing. So it's very important to listen to your body and alternate between these different focal points to find the ones that work for you and not be afraid to vary that focal point as you continue your fitness journey. And that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or ideas for future topics you'd like to see covered, please drop them below. Thanks so much. Bye.